Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the live Q&A for Premon. I am so glad that you could join us for this conversation, and I just want to make sure to get a couple things off the list before we get started. First off, I want to remind you that closing weekend of the festival is coming up, so please don't forget to vote. So go to the website on the screening site and then rate the films you've seen using the stars on each film's page. Your votes for the Golden Space Needle Audience Awards will be announced on Sunday, so please get those in because it's very important to the filmmakers and it is good for recognition around the world. All right, so before we officially start, I would like to take a moment to say that we here at SIFF acknowledge that we occupy indigenous land, the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people. Thank you. Now, if you have any questions for the filmmakers, please put those into the Q&A feature. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A will be used to send questions to the director and I, and you can use the chat for conversation amongst yourselves. And that way we can make sure that we can have everyone in more robust dialogue than we would have otherwise. Okay. So with all of that said, I am so pleased to introduce you to our guest for this conversation, the writer and director of Premon, Ramdolph Zani.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. I would love to, your film is so intriguing to me and I find so many things fascinating about it. The film Premon has so many unique concepts or concepts I haven't seen presented in that specific way in a film before. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your initial inspiration was for the film.
So Premon is based on a very personal story of my own. It happened in 2018, where my family had to deal with this crisis, where my father, who has been a stranger all my life to me, we usually kept at a distance. He got extorted. He got caught in an extortion scheme. And during that time, it threw our family, the whole family, into chaos. He was falsely imprisoned, and then he became depressed and suicidal. And we, as a family, we were doing our best, making pleas everywhere to get him exonerated. And during those sleepless nights, I started getting inspired to write this script that deals with the father and the son and the glass wall between them. Because at the end, to tell a long story short, my father was exonerated. He was cleared of all charges, and he walked away a free man because he was falsely imprisoned in the first place. But it was only through this ordeal that we became closer than we've ever been before in my entire life. So that was the that was the inspiration of the movie.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, was the extortion, was that tied to the Premon in Indonesia themselves, or was that just the inspiration for the idea of the film?
It's absolutely tied to the whole Premonism ecosystem in Indonesia. Except what we were dealing with were not only the street level Premons, as you see on the film, but also the white collar Premons. And this is something that is sadly a common occurrence that happens here. But yeah, it's the strong against the weak, right? Yeah. And I started thinking that this is something that we are familiar with since at a young age. In a nutshell, Premon is about bullying, and bullying starts at home, at school, in business, in politics. The bullies, they don't disappear. They are hiding in plain sight, and we are surrounded by them, or we are part of that ecosystem of that vicious cycle of abuse of power. So that's yeah. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry if I veer off.
Yes, you did. I would wonder if you could give our viewers a little history on what the Premon are in Indonesia, maybe a little bit of the history and how they came into being and what they do, what they represent, and how they act in society now.
Right. Premon is a term that was invented or bestowed on Indonesian thugs and criminals during the Dutch colonization of Indonesia. During that time, when they had to take control over the slaves, they needed some sort of middleman to oppress the people, and the criminals and the thugs were given the title Freeman, which in Dutch means free man, and it gives this title is a double-edged sword, because on one hand they started thinking they had this false conception of being freed from slavery, where and they were the one being employed by the Dutch colonies to oppress the slave, to keep them in order. And it begs the question, which kind of slavery is worse? Is it the one where you are physically beaten and whipped, or you are being enslaved without even knowing? And that's the history of Freeman. And up until today, there are many Fremans in Indonesia, and it is associated with gangster. And you have that kind of romantic image of being a gangster, of being a badass, and being a tough guy, respected by society. But if you look deeper into that, it's basically they are basically bullies who claim that they are fighting for justice, but at the end of the day, they are the one extorting security money and such, and they are the one running the criminal organizations in Indonesia.
Yeah, it sounds like a very rich, well, it is obviously from the film, a very rich well to draw from for the script. So once you had met with the script, you and your co-producer, Ryan Ricardo, both of you had never made a film before, is that correct?
Yes, it's funny that Ryan and we have been friends since we were 10 years old, since elementary school. He was the reason that I learned English extensively, because he lent me video games, and I learned English through video games. And we have been we've been close friends throughout our lives, our entire lives. And there was a time back in 2015 when I went back to Indonesia, and he proposed that we should try out shoot a short film with no budget. We had $1,000 and we had no crew. We didn't know anybody in the Indonesian film industry. So what we ended up doing was we call up our old friends, elementary school friends who we haven't talked to for like 10 years, 15 years, and we basically prepped them to shoot this fun little short film called Polisi Maling. I wrote the script in 2 days. We had 18 people, and I had like about 7 to 10 days to give a filmmaking workshop, and we shot the whole film and we sent it out to festivals, and we actually got into 18 festivals with 22 awards in this festival. And it's funny because none of the people who were involved in making that movie had ever made even a short film before. We had a boom operator who was an accountant. We have our cinematographer was a wedding photographer, but that gave us the kind of a confident boost to see maybe we can try out making a feature film. So Ryan and I together, we had this idea, let's make a feature version of that short film. But that was when the crisis or the tragedy against my family happened, and we took a hard left turn over the story.
So I'm curious. So did you kind of employ on a larger scale, obviously, the same kind of a process for assembling the team for this film? Did you continue to go out to people you knew and to gather things, or did you find you had more resources this time?
Yes. For starter, the cast, we re-invited them as a thank you for working with us on that short film with absolutely no budget, unpaid. And of the cast and the people that helped out, Kifa, the lead actor, he agreed to get on board. And also the guy, my casting director, who helped out in the short film, he helped being the casting director for Freeman too. He even appeared in the film itself. He's the guy, the dancing guy, Paul. Okay. He's my casting director. And they're quite they're quite veterans in the Indonesian film industry, and through them we met people who are willing to listen to our story and be involved in it. And aside from that, we have friends of a friend that we reach out, and those who are kind enough to get back to us, they listen to our story, and they were established artists. They're all established artists, and they usually work for a much higher pay, but they have this kind of like very noble solidarity in them, that they saw us, and they know we're struggling, and we have barely enough budget to make this ambitious movie. And they say like, all right, we'll play along, pay us with student film fees, and we'll give it our all. Let's try to make something good.
Very cool.
So that's how it started.
You mentioned Kifa, the lead actor. Now, am I correct that in real life he is not deaf?
Oh no, he's in real life he's not deaf.
Okay. So I'm curious a little bit about the reason I bring it up is because it was a very naturalistic, and from the deaf people who I have known in my life, a very realistic portrayal of someone deaf, more so than many other films are. And I was curious if there was some specific ways you went about preparing for him to play the deaf character, and how you went about creating that ambiance for him.
Right. We learned a lot about the deaf culture in Indonesia and how things are right now. And Ryan has a friend who created this foundation / cafe car wash for the deaf people that employ exclusively deaf people. And he introduced me to them, and we proposed our movie. And it just so happens one of the leaders of that organization, that foundation, is the foremost sign language expert in Indonesia, Madam Pat Sulistiawati, who's been deaf her whole life since she was born, but she can communicate with everybody by reading the lips. And before we move forward with our proposal to make the movie, we tell them what the movie is about, what it stands for, how it represents deaf people, to get their approval first. And after that, they agreed to help us in prepping the actors, or especially Kifa, Muzaki, and Putri, who had to use the sign language in the film. And they had a quite intensive sign language workout. And even part of the script were changed, the dialogue, to make it more naturalistic for the deaf people.
Okay.
Seeing the signs.
That's very good. That's very good. That is a great resource that you were able to draw from that. So amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about, and we've talked a lot about the mechanics of putting things together, but maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the tone of the film and some of the other aspects of the film as well. One of the things I really enjoyed, and I think I'm not really allowed to tell people about films until they're officially announced, but I did mention to someone that I saw a really great fight scene that used a monkey paw and a pair of scissors. Two pairs of scissors. And I find it really interesting because though you had a lot of traditional weapons that you had in the film, both Sandy and the main hired assassin, their weapons of choice were ones that we rarely actually see in film. And I was wondering, where did the idea come from that these would be the two weapons of choice they were using, and how did that maybe change or affect how you went about choreographing the fight scenes as opposed to other ways or more traditional ways?
Right. When we set out to make Preman, we never intended to set out to make an action film, because if you want to look at it that way, then you might say it's a drama disguised as action, because all of the action needs to support the storytelling, the plot or the character reveals, the character arcs of the people using the weapons and such. And as you can see, the fight scenes themselves, they're not supposed to be a martial arts showcase. They're supposed to be messy. These are untrained fighters, but they fight. They can fight through because of their experience fighting street fights. And the decision to use Sandy's weapon, Monkey Fist, is because I learn about the weapon that was used by sailors in the past, where they tie a monkey fist knot and they use it when they got into a drunken bar brawl. And it's not even supposed to be a weapon, but it's an improvised weapon. So that kind of like shows that he's not a martial artist, a master. And the name itself was interesting for me because of the element of the monkey. If you notice, the film has a lot of animal symbolism, and Sandy is represented by a monkey. And the reason I use the animal food chain symbolism in the movie is because it goes along parallelly with the whole concept of bullying. But who is at the top? The Fremen themselves, they are represented by foxes because they're predators and they hunt in packs. They have strength in numbers, and that's how Fremenism works usually in Indonesia. Sandy and Sandy's childhood friend and his son, they're represented by bunnies. So if you look in the film, you keep seeing images of rabbits all the time. And they're basically the herbivore, and they have no defense mechanism. They're integral part of the ecosystem that needs to be protected. While Sandy himself, he's somebody that is torn in between these two. He's an omnivore. And throughout the whole film, he's always being pulled from one side to the other.
Very good. I caught the bunnies, but I somehow missed the parts of that. Oh, and the monkey part as well. But the bunny part I had registered because I was like, there's a lot of bunnies with these people are around. That's very cool. That's very informative. Appreciate that. So I was doing a little bit of reading, and I saw that some of the plot details and situations in the film were represented or drawn from some of the current political issues in Indonesia. I know we talked about the feminism itself, but it seemed like there were some other things that were afoot at the time that you were drawing from, and maybe incorporating real life situations happening at the time into the film. I wonder if you could tell the audience and myself a little more about that.
It is the plot that you see about the eviction of the residents in the villages. That is something that is very common. It's Indonesia, Jakarta especially, the people keep developing new buildings, new high-rise tower, new malls, as if we don't have enough of them. And during this process that we see as a country or a city being developed, we often overlook the toll on the people who've been living in those areas for generations. And the method that you see in Preman is basically what people do. They hire the developers or the people in the government. They hire Premans to evict and kick out the people, or extort or blackmail them. So they would vacate the area so they can clear out. And it just so happens that in the location that we use for eviction, they were in the middle of protests of this high-rise tower being planned to be built on their area, and they had to fight this eviction process. We had all posters and banners of people pleading and protesting about the high-rise tower buildings over there.
Very good, very nice. We have had a thread that has kind of run through a number of these conversations about the films that have really kind of struck us this year, that were all involving in some kind of community activist way. Like they've all incorporated things in their lives in a much more direct way. That was interesting. That was also applicable to this film, especially as a first film. It's a very smart and savvy kind of incorporation that presents a lot of really direct things on kind of a more accessible way, so perhaps for people who are unaware of the situation. But the extra layer of resonance, I imagine, is very, very well felt inside of Indonesia audiences when they watch it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think I want to just make sure that we cover one last thing, because I want to make sure in all of this conversation we've had thus far, I think one of the things that really struck me about your film we haven't touched on, which is that in the midst of all of these darker themes and all of these more complicated political and social situations, you have maintained this very wonderful dark sense of humor throughout the film. And I want to know a little bit about how you thought about that, how you kind of tried to accomplish that in the making and the writing of the film, as well as the execution of it.
Well, the thing is, that reminds me of the quote that comedy is tragedy seen from afar. And when everything that involves Premanism often involves tragedy. And yet at the same time, we Indonesians, we are used to Premanism. And oftentimes that's part of our daily life. And we do have dark humor or dark outlook on life. And I felt that it's actually a more honest approach to incorporate these viewpoints. And a lot of the comedic moments in the film, they were the results of my discussion with my cast and crew about what to incorporate on top of the existing script. And oftentimes I found their own personal experience and tragedy and the discrimination that they felt that they want to incorporate. But at the same time, we were trying very hard not to make this movie too much of a moral story. We're not trying to spoon feed like this is wrong and all. And dark comedy is one of the best way to deliver that and let the audience decide what their own conclusions.
Excellent. So thank you. So I have a question for you that's kind of a little bit broader. Now that you have actually finished your first feature film, so I want to know what you think now that looking back, how hard would you think it would be for someone else to have done that film if they had not had the recent education you had because you had gone to USC for film school and you have all of that you brought it to bear on this. I think the audience would like to know a little bit about how that plays into your knowledge of what you needed to accomplish by going in such a go it alone, do it yourself kind of a style for making this film. How much did that information help you?
If I'm getting the question right, sorry, it was a little muffled just now. For somebody who didn't go to film school and they want to make a film, how hard would that be? I think that is something that is really relevant, and I always thought it's relevant to what kind of story that you want to tell and how personal it is to you. And recently I learned about where you are located at, and you have to adjust to what is available to you. When we tried to make Preman, we actually pitched to many investors, and we were turned down by many too. And it's unsurprisingly because we were nobodies and we were just starting out. So me coming here from USC, having graduated there, it didn't play much role over here because nobody cares. Yeah. But at the same time, we didn't give up. We kept pitching. We save up money. We borrowed. We get loans, and we put together, a micro budget to make this film, and we pitch it out to fellow artists out there. So I think what really helped in that situation, to go back to your question, is you shouldn't be shy or you shouldn't hesitate to ask for people. And the worst they could say is no. And we had many people say no to us previously. But those who said yes, they really took us a long way. And they could be cast, crew, actors, makeup artists, all that they reach out to us. They got back to us after we reached out to them, and they agreed to help. If you show how personal a story is, how much you put into it, I think how much effort and your soul you put into a script or a story, I think it will affect people who listen to it and hopefully move them as well.
Thank you. We probably have just a little bit more time left, but I wanted just to ask a little bit more about what is next for you and for Preman the film. want to know if there's any new things that are on the horizon for the film in terms of other screenings after this, and also if there are any things on the horizon for you as far as what your plans are, and other projects or things you want to work on.
Right. In the case for Preman, right now we are still working the festival circuit, and we are trying to find distribution, to find homes, more homes for Preman, and hopefully we can continue our career, because when we finished Preman and the pandemic start, everything went to full stop, and we could barely move because we couldn't launch the film and we had nothing to show. We couldn't secure an investor for our next projects, and our hope is that this film can get bought, can get purchased and represented and get into people's home. And hopefully by then we'll have a track record for people to have more faith in us to invest and support us in our next filmmaking endeavor. As in the case for the next projects that I have a few scripts that some are in development, some are already fully developed, that we are trying to pitch to investors and studios and production houses who would be willing to work with us. Because frankly speaking, after we did Preman, there's no way we could do another one on our own again. So we really exhausted everything that we have to make this film. Yeah, and it's safe to say that I believe I have been more than I can chew by making a movie with this, fight scenes and all that.
Sure. I'm sure it was a huge challenge, but you did an admirable job, and I really appreciate that you stuck it out. I look forward to more things from you. I want to ask you two things. One, if there's a way that people could follow you or follow Preman, if you wanted to drop that in the chat. Just so
yes.
And then I have one question from the audience left that I'll ask you, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, sounds good.
You have one more question from the audience, which wants to know a little bit more about the color tone of the movie. The question itself is, the color tone that the Preman movie uses is bold. Is there a concept that you had behind this?
Yes, absolutely. There's a concept behind all that. I'm so excited. I'm so happy to hear this question, because we did put a lot of work into this into maintaining the color scheme. Basically, if you see that this movie is colorful, it's because it represents different type of characters and what they stand for. For a starter, we use what is called the comic book style trichromatic color scheme, where we have primary colors of red, blue, and yellow. And that is something that we often see in comic books, where heroes are usually represented by these colors. Yellow, blue is something noble like Superman, with a touch of red, of courage, such things like that. Spider-Man, blue and red, or Iron Man, red and yellow. The yellow adds a little touch of a comedic or lightheartedness, like Robin, for example, or the Flash. And what these three colors represents are the protagonist, the antagonist, and the protagonist's conscience. The blue represents Sandy's conscience, Lucas, his childhood friend, and Pandu, his own son. Sandy himself is represented by yellow, and he's the protagonist, and Guru, the main antagonist, is red. And from these three characters, they are surrounded by secondary characters, supporting characters, who are the combination of these three colors. So, for example, the Ramon, the barber, he is blue and yellow. He's the mirror image of the protagonist. He's what Sandy could have become if you embrace the dark side completely. And Commandant, he's represented by purple, red and blue. And he represents the police, who is usually passive. They accept their role in the world of Premanism as a passive bystander. They don't do anything. And his character arc reveals that in the end, he has to do something to fulfill his role. And of course, we have orange, which is red and yellow, and that signifies the Preman, the Preman gang. And after the first and secondary character, we have the tertiary characters. For example, Cherry, the commandant's girlfriend. She's also red and blue, but she's not mixed, unlike Commandant. She still knows the difference between the red world and the blue world. And that's why her costume, her makeup, everything that's on her is always separated between the red and blue, unlike Commandant that is already jaded and he cannot see the line between Preman or police anymore.
Yeah, and that's representing that near the end when she kind of stands up for the situation to do what's right. And it has not been done right so long by these passively sat there and watched to do that.
Right. And that also something that is a concept that was discussed extensively with my female members of the cast and crew about how women should be represented and how what do they stand for in this very male dominated, all about toxic masculinity world. And they say like, yeah, we are usually reduced to the role of being a supporting, act, for like all these men who claim to be powerful or badass or Preman or police. And but we are the one who knows, because we are not drunk with that type of power. We don't abuse them, and we know the difference between right and wrong. And that's why we have those scenes with Sandy's wife, played wonderfully by Putri Ayudhya, and Cherry by Salvita Decord, and where they put the men down.
We have one last question for even from the audience, who's asking in regards to the release date for the film. As I understand it, you are still in the festival circuit, correct?
Right.
Right. So the best thing to do for them to follow along and follow the film and the links you've dropped in there, so they can find out where it's coming next. And they can also tell their friends about it and get the word out there. They can make sure to start a little crowdsourcing campaign for you.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Excellent. So make sure to take a look at that in the chat. Make sure to spread that around to your friends. Make sure if you have not already voted on Preman on the SIF platform, make sure you do that, because it is good for prizes and reputation around the world. And these are always very good things for a new film to have. So please make sure to take a moment for that. Make sure to say hello to everyone that you have back in Indonesia. And I wish you all the best in the coming months. And I wish all the best for you and Preman.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and have fun with the remaining days of the festivals.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.